Hello again. Everyone answered the question? Yeah. No one looked ahead? I saw a couple people. Okay. We're going to do a quick icebreaker before we get started. Thank you for your patience as we just waited for more folks to come, made sure our technology was all set. So I know we have a few guests in the room who don't live or work in the neighborhood, but might serve the neighborhood in a different way. So for those of you who do live or work in the neighborhood, I'm going to ask for you to stand up and say your name and the number of years. And let's do it this way. Maybe at one point you did, and then you left, and then you came back. Just give me a summation, okay, of years that you've lived and or worked in the neighborhood. Does that make sense? Any questions? Would anyone like to volunteer to go first? Yes, sir. I would love for you to stand if you could. Thank you, sir.
God bless you. I love you. I am Sonny Guy Richard. I've been a resident of this neighborhood for over 22 years, and I am so in love with Straight Gate for standing up, doing this in the community. God bless y'all, and y'all keep it up.
Thank you. Shall I pass?
God bless you. I love you. I'm Robert Barton. I'm a resident of the neighborhood for, how about 42 years?
42. Mm-hmm. 22, 42. Where am I going next? Live or work? Raise your hand.
Hi, my name is Diane Pears. I have been in the neighborhood. We live in the neighborhood. It's been 1 year.
Woo-hoo.
Hi, I'm Linnell Jenkins. I'm a school counselor at McKenzie Elementary Middle School, so I've been working in the neighborhood for 10 years.
All right, thank you.
Steve Purchase, I work with the Carpenters Union, and we've been in the neighborhood now about 6 months.
All right, wonderful.
Hi, everybody. I'm Vanessa Bennett. I've been in the neighborhood 50 years. And I've taken advantage of most of the things that Straight Gate has offered. I appreciate when they had their concerts and their food giveaways, and I love their TV channel. I just have to say that, because I can watch, I could watch it day or night. If I can't sleep, I cut it on, and I'm bound to see somebody doing something good. So I'm appreciative of y'all.
Thank you. Who shall I go to next? To this middle table? Yeah. There's some years here? I was told you had some years to add, Bishop.
Let's say 1 more, 2 more, 3 more. How about 20 more?
How many have you been here?
33 years.
33 years.
Mm-hmm.
You go 33 plus 33 over here. Because they both been here 33 years. Right. What was that?
Me too.
Okay. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Live or work? Want to add? John, what about you? Okay. Yep. So
I guess 33 too.
33 as well. David? 33? Okay. Where are we at? What's our number there, Dave? 290 years collectively. So just thought that might be an interesting opening activity to do, to recognize how much experience is in the room, how many different things people have seen, whether they've lived or worked here. I've worked here since 2015, Dave. Can you add mine? 297. Just wanted to recognize what a wealth of knowledge is in the room, and want to acknowledge that, and thank you all for being here, and thank you for your support over the last several months. And I'm going to turn it over to this guy over here to get us going.
Can we give her a round of applause? So to get going, we just want to thank each and every single person that is here this evening. And in fact, we wouldn't be here tonight had it not been for the input and feedback that we've received from residents and stakeholders throughout this master planning process. You've shared your heart with us, you've shared your ideas, you've shared everything with us, and we are eternally grateful, not only us, but also our design team. And so tonight, we're just amazed to see how many people are here who share a deep love for this neighborhood as well as the city of Detroit. And so it is our honor that we have this opportunity to present to you the second iteration of a project and plan that we call The Neighborhood Shall Not Remain Nameless. And it's our hope that after this presentation, you'll have a very good understanding of how these three organizations, whose logos you see on the screen here, Give Merit, Straight Gate, and Renaissance of Hope, are all working together to make this neighborhood a more equitable place, and how we want to partner with you to do so. So before we begin, I'd like to introduce who you'll be hearing from tonight. You have myself representing Straight Gate, Give Merit, and Renaissance of Hope, my brother Jonathan Merritt, who is also representing those three organizations, Kuhu Saha, who is the co-founder and executive director of Give Merit, and Imani Day, who is the principal and founder of Revision Studios, who's been leading the development and design work for this master plan. And so to get going, I would like to show you a short video that gives you an overview of what we are attempting to accomplish here in this neighborhood that we've been located in for the last 33 years here in Detroit, off of Grand River and Livernois.
My name is David Merritt, Associate Pastor of the Straight Gate International Church. We present to you, The Neighborhood Shall Not Remain Nameless, where our goal is to reverse the effects of discriminatory policies that limit opportunities for communities of color by developing a neighborhood for Black folks, built by Black folks. Beginning in the mid-1960s, Detroit faced a period of enormous civil upheaval. The mass exodus of whites from the city center, coupled with rising rates of poverty, led to increases in violence and crime and serious racial tensions. They are the result of systematic inequalities like flawed property assessments, neighborhood disinvestment, and racism. The neighborhood has tremendous opportunity to help raise its poorest residents out of poverty and revitalize its local economy, housing markets, and neighborhood landscape, and we've already gotten off to a great start. Taking 43 parcels already under our control, this project will increase racial equity in our community by community building and people building, providing resources and opportunities for everyone from infants to adults. We're building upon the history and strengths of the neighborhood by repurposing vacant buildings and lots while maximizing resources of existing spaces, organizations, and proposed projects. We'll accomplish this vision by engaging residents and stakeholders, creating a sense of ownership and pride in the neighborhood.
That was kind of good. So the common theme that you'll see throughout this presentation is one of equity, or the lack thereof. And I think we're all aware of what happens in communities of color that have been oppressed generation after generation and haven't received the proper opportunities and resources to be successful. You can even call it disinvestment, and we have to call this neighborhood the neighborhood because it doesn't have a name. And so these are opportunities and resources that my parents always made sure that we were afforded. And so this is important for us, my brother and I, to continue that legacy, to ensure that countless kids are provided those same opportunities. And so this is personal for us because we've watched our parents dedicate their entire lives to the well-being of other people. 43 years ago, the two of them and my sister Rochelle opened up Straight Gate International Church in a small storefront building at 14726 Joy Road. And as the ministry continued to grow and grow, despite several opportunities, my dad made it a point that he would never leave the city because he believes he's called to the city and he loves the people of this city so much. And he's taught us to love and to serve in that same manner. And so that love led him to start one of the very first charter schools in the state of Michigan back in 1998 called Hope Academy. And you're actually sitting where the school was located up until about 2012. And the school is founded on academic excellence, student responsibility, and parental partnership, and is still in operation about a mile down the road on Broad Street, and currently serves close to 500 students pre-K through the 8th grade. And so I'm glad we never left, because this is us today. Father and sons doing ministry. And our definition of ministry is when divine resources meet human needs through loving channels. And it's these lessons that we've learned from my parents, along with a special experience that I had playing basketball at the University of Michigan, that have really helped shape my viewpoint on what a servant leader is. And my experience at the University of Michigan was very unique. It took me 3 years to make the team as a walk-on, but by my last year, I was appointed a captain, put on athletic scholarship, and we made the NCAA tournament for the first time in 11 years. And what that experience taught me was that giving up is just not an option. And so that's the same sentiment that we share with our young people today, that giving up on them is simply not an option. And one of the ways that we make sure that that happens is through a clothing company that we started called Merit, which helps and supports youth in the city of Detroit by donating 20% of our profits to fund a very special program that we run in the city called FATE, that is currently supporting 150 Detroit youth and has distributed over $200,000 in college scholarships the past 5 years. And so giving up on our youth is not an option, as well as giving up on this neighborhood is not an option. And so for the past 2 years through this pandemic, we've been able to interact with neighborhood residents, I think, more than we've ever had. We've been able to identify with the needs of this neighborhood over the last 2 years more than we ever had. And through a special partnership with Forgotten Harvest, we are blessed that we've been able to provide food assistance up to, I think, close to 1 million pounds of food over the last 2 years to help those that are in need. And I'm going to pass it to my brother, who's going to continue this presentation.
Thank you, Dave. You all have helped identify the gaps that exist in the neighborhood. But here else is what we know about the current existing conditions. Nearly 1/3 of the properties are vacant. The median home value in the area of the 2019 study is $35,400. Only 22% of households are owner occupied, and there are no city or neighborhood serving parks or open spaces. Now, you just heard the background story of Straight Gate Church and the wonderful work that goes on here in Give Merit. But it's those existing conditions that we just discussed which helped us to form Renaissance of Hope, which is a full-service, nonprofit, community development corporation arm of Straight Gate, which will oversee the 43 neighborhood parcels. And it's amazing what we're doing here. But our commitment is to do even more. And here's how we plan to operate and who we are. So who are we? We are inclusive. Now, we do want to be a leader of this work, but our commitment is to work alongside residents and some great organizations. And to name a few, the Order of the Fishermen, Tuxedo Project in Ceciliaville. And they say that the best leaders are the best servants. And that's why our commitment is to work with everyone to make this neighborhood better. We are not here to make money. So once again, we are a nonprofit, community development corporation, which aim is not to make money for ourselves, but to increase the equity for the residents here in the neighborhood. We do not have unlimited resources. So sometimes people look at this massive building that you're sitting in today, and they think, oh, they must be swimming in cash. But trust me, that is just not the case. It's just not the case. Not yet, it's just not the case. But what it is that because it's so that all the work that we're doing on this neighborhood plan, we currently have 0 employees and all the work is voluntarily based at the moment. We cannot be and do everything. This once again goes back to partnering and collaborating with others. And we hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll have a clear understanding of what Renaissance of Hope is committed to do. we are not beyond reproach. So we understand that this work is hard. And yes, we will make mistakes. And we might disagree with you and might have different opinions. But our commitment is we are not going anywhere. And we're going to continue to serve the residents in this neighborhood to make about a positive change. So what's up with this plan? This is what is true. This plan that we're talking about today is how we plan to contribute. But is this the neighborhood master plan? No. This is our plan for the parcels that we currently own and the ones that we hope to acquire within the boundaries identified. Is this plan finished? It is not. It will continue to improve as we continue to move about specific projects and engage more residents. Do we currently have all the resources? We do not. This is our vision to increase equity, health, wealth, and agency within the neighborhood. Now, you just heard about Straight Gate, Give Merit, and now Renaissance of Hope. But here's a better way to break it down. Straight Gate and Renaissance of Hope is here to improve the outcomes for the leaders of today, whereas Give Merit and its youth development work is here to improve the outcomes of the leaders of tomorrow. Thank you. Here is Kuhu Saha.
Send me in here after 2 pastors. Let's see how I do. Thanks, John. I'm so pleased to be here today to talk about the first project that's going to kick off this plan. And I must hit the screen, Merritt Park. Again, I'm Kuhu, as John mentioned. I have the pleasure of being the co-founder of Give Merit with David. And this project has been 4.5 years in the making. It calls for demoing 2 buildings that have sat at the front of the neighborhood for the last 30 years, blighted, and developing a state-of-the-art park facility. You heard a little bit about the youth development work that we do with the FATE program from Dave. We have been successfully doing this work for the last 10 years and have impacted hundreds of youth. Everything we've learned through FATE, as well as engagement with nearby schools and neighborhood residents, have led us here today. I'm going to start by showing you a short video to help introduce the project.
Coming where I'm from, not a lot is handed to you. The type of place you fall in love with reading, with no books. And what's handed to you pales in comparison to what's said about you. They tell you it's because you're lazy. They tell you it's because you're a girl. They tell you it's because of your hair. But it's amazing how much they believe about you and how little they believe in you. The greatest gift one can give to another human being is to believe in them. Because it's a gift we all can afford. And with this gift, I'll cry my way or even sigh my way. But best believe, I'll find my way. And even when I don't see a lane, I got this. I'll create my own.
So like John said, our organization is focused on creating and focused on the leaders of tomorrow and creating, and ensuring that they have equitable opportunities in this world. Merritt Park, as you saw, encourages young people to take the shot or believe in themselves. It will work to instill confidence and to demonstrate the value and worth that each of our young people have living inside of them. We started this work by asking young people what they wanted. This was 4.5 years ago. What do you want? What do you need? We continued it by continuing to ask that question of more young people and of adults in this neighborhood. We also looked at the data. What we saw was that the closest recreation center to this neighborhood was 2 miles away, that there are over 7,000 young people ages 0 to 19 living in this zip code, and that almost 43% of residents are identified as living below the federal poverty line. Merritt Park will bring recreation as well as additional programming and services right into this neighborhood. It will be accessible via low-cost membership that we plan to raise a lot of money through corporate sponsorships so that we can subsidize those memberships so that nobody in the neighborhood will have to pay that fee. We anticipate that the park will be open Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., and on Sundays from 2 to 7, and that will offer a variety of programming and activities for all ages. So the natural assumption when you see a facility like this is that it's a place for young people to play, and that's absolutely true. We anticipate that there will be great health outcomes coming out of this, that there will be great physical and recreational play that will happen here. But in addition to that, we view this facility as something that we can use for multiple uses. And so we anticipate that we can meet the needs of neighborhood residents, both through physical impact, but also through education, through the economy, and environmentally. So I'm going to take you through a few of the elements that you see here. So starting down here, you see this parking lot. As we, let me get away from that speaker. As we move up there, you'll see an obstacle course as well as a 31.3-yard dash and a nod to Detroit. Moving to the left, where you see that bit of orange, that's a splash pad. So young kids can play in the water in the summer, but we can also turn off the water and hold performances for the neighborhood to enjoy. I'll come back to this center part where you see the basketball court, but if I can direct your eye to the outer edge, you'll see sort of a curved fence line. And the idea there is that this park is going to offer a really beautified space, but what we want to ensure is that even when you're standing right outside of the park, there's beautification going on outside as well. You move over here to a miniature turf field, and we're rounded out on that corner with a shipping container yard. So getting into the building a bit, what you see on this outside wall is a rock climbing wall. Inside will be an NBA-sized regulation basketball court, but the building will also be full of world-class technology. And it's our goal to continue to offer amazing youth development programming where we have opportunities for young people to create the future. That programming will be in audio-video technology, retail, entrepreneurship, sports, broadcasting, and much more. And finally, you saw these in the video as well. This is the shipping container yard. And so here you'll have food and retail, which will really diversify the options that we have right here in the neighborhood. It'll also welcome local businesses. And one container that I want to tell you about is a teaching kitchen container, where our goal is to help families learn how to cook healthy meals. This facility will impact health and wealth in this neighborhood, but it will also have economic impact by creating job and employment opportunities and environmental impact by removing those blighted buildings I spoke about, as well as implementing a green infrastructure. I'm going to pass it back to David.
So, we think it's very important to create momentum, to create spaces where the community can gather, where we can build relationships, where we can share ideas. And so that's going to be very important at Merritt Park, but it also is going to be one of the big focuses for the Resource Hub. And so we believe that neighborhood residents deserve, right where they live, deserve access to human services that they can help strengthen their families, access to the type of job training and placement where they can help strengthen their families. And so you are currently sitting on the second floor of the school building, but our plan with the Resource Hub is to reimagine and renovate all 3 floors of the school building in the following ways. On the bottom floor, the plan is to renovate our commercial kitchen. And this plan will allow us to teach cooking classes, to serve meals to those that are in need, and to also start a food incubator so local food entrepreneurs can have access to the type of space and equipment to not only start their business, but also grow their business. On the second floor, the emphasis on family services, sobriety classes, job training and placement, access to a new child care facility. This is going to be the focus of the second floor, along with our Give Merit and FATE youth development programs. And then lastly, on the third floor, that focus on jobs continues, where we're going to be building an innovation lab focused on technology, as well as a co-working space, so businesses and nonprofits in the area can collide and strengthen their impact. And so why can't catalytic spaces and developments like these be in this neighborhood? We believe the neighborhood residents deserve access to these type of services and these types of amenities, and it doesn't have to be downtown, and it doesn't have to be in the suburbs, but it can be right where you live and where you have lived for decades. And so now we are going to pause for the first time. We have about 3 minutes of time, and you can now flip your page. Okay, so you just heard about Merritt Park, and you just heard about the Resource Hub, and we want to hear some feedback. And so there's a few pages. Don't feel bad if you're not able to get to all the questions in the 3 minutes, but we'll have more time, but we want to help you get started, and we thank you for your honest feedback.
Hello. So that was a very quick 3 minutes. We will have more time for you guys to fill out as much as you'd like to throughout the presentation. But I'll reintroduce myself. I'm Imani Day with Revision Studios. Hello. Leading the strategic development plan for the Grand River, I'm going to do that many times, Grand River, Livernois area. And so I'm really excited to share with you all what we've been working on, what the design team has been working on. I want to just do a quick shout out to the design team sitting in the back. That's Carl, Ujiji, and Andrew. And if you have questions and things throughout the presentation, they're back there for answers. But so we're excited to share all of the really good work and energy that's been put into understanding the neighborhood a little bit better, and then thinking about the continuation of projects. And so you already know quite a bit about your own neighborhood. We're not here to tell you facts about your neighborhood, but just so you understand, and to reiterate the opportunities here, we have an excellent location here, highly accessible, and it's central to Detroit. We have really strong local institutions and organizations, a new carpentry training center, and so we have new amenities coming like the Joe Louis Greenway, and extremely dedicated residents and people in the neighborhood who care quite a bit about the future of this neighborhood, as we know, everyone present tonight. So we're also aware, I don't want to hang too long on the challenges, but as John and Dave already mentioned, there's a high residential vacancy, so low residential occupancy in each of the blocks and houses here. You can see the differences on each street. There are lack of neighborhood-oriented businesses, so what's specific to your needs, what is wanted by the community and the current residents for future residents to come as well. And like we've mentioned, no parks or public open spaces, and so the goal is to, through many different types of introduced developments, we can achieve something that's central to your neighborhood specifically. And of course, we know Grand River and Livernois are car dominated, so it's hard to walk around this neighborhood without feeling unsafe up against the vehicular traffic, and the streets are not catered to the pedestrian experience currently. So what we're trying to think about in our neighborhood sort of transformative projects is how to soothe some of these challenges and improve the experience for residents and visitors alike to the neighborhood. And so you'll see a bunch of diagrams, and I'll walk everyone through. And we've already talked about Merritt Park and the Resource Hub, so you have a better understanding of those kind of catalytic projects that are coming online in the near term. But as we know, we have quite a few vacant lots in the neighborhood that we have looked at some exciting opportunities to develop new open lot programming and amenities for the neighborhood, again, that are catered to you specifically. And thinking through housing variety and mixed-use development. So there's quite a bit of need for residential infill and residential rehabilitation. And so we want to think about that, and then, like we've already mentioned, the neighborhood-oriented resources that come in the mixed-use projects that also allow for variety in the housing typologies, and then commercial spaces catered to you. And so before I go to that, you'll see quite a bit here. I don't know if this is a laser pointer, but the yellow represented on the map is just looking at where we think, in terms of where Renaissance of Hope and Straight Gate already own parcels, where we can put more housing to start to stabilize the blocks and the streets. One house on Monica, you'll see sprinkled there, just as the beginning of the rehabilitation projects. We know for sure that Merritt Park and the Resource Hub at the back of the church are coming online really soon, but there are a whole world of other aspects of streetscaping, connectivity, walkability, and improving the experience in the neighborhood that have to come together in order for this neighborhood progress to feel holistic. And so before I get too deep into all of those projects specifically, we want to take a look at where we started, which this is where our team has started, the revision design team has started. But there's been quite a bit of due diligence on the Renaissance of Hope and Straight Gate, Give Merit part prior to this that started the study, started the understanding of what might be appropriate in the neighborhood. So we start in August with a project launch with a visioning to understand from Renaissance of Hope, Straight Gate, Merit, what the vision for the project is. This is the 43 plus parcels. What can we do with this land? What do we already know? What do we already know is good, and what do we want to see in the near and long term for this neighborhood? Then a lot of people in the room, luckily, really great to see the familiar faces, we'll see for the September 16th and the September 23rd meetings, we met with you all to talk about what do you call your neighborhood? What are some great spaces in the neighborhood that we want to maintain? Where are some areas of improvement where we can start to think about introducing new types of development so that we can better support the residents and the community alike? And then December 13th, we had an activity that was really centered around you all hands-on placing amenities, housing, all of the different development types, open lot programming in your neighborhood so we could understand where you think these things are appropriate. And so taking information from that meeting and all of the meetings to date, we have come up with what we'll show you in a moment, which is what we are presenting as ideas and implementation strategies for how we get some of those projects done. And then finally, this is not at all the end of the community meetings. Our design participation comes to a presentation so we can understand the strategy. But the goal is that this will start to influence more organizations in the neighborhood to carry this forward. So there's more community meetings, there's definitely more brainstorming, and there's room for input still. So, as I mentioned, December 13th, we had this meeting where we asked you, where should we put these exciting new developments? What types of spaces do you need to see in terms of the commercial and mixed-use spaces? And what you'll see is it's not very different from what I just showed on a different slide. The housing aspect, is this a pointer? Ooh, okay, that's the pointer. So the housing shown on Prairie and Burlingame here, you can see quite a bit. This is what the community members at the tables placed as single-family homes and multifamily homes. You can see that also sprinkled on the other side of Prairie. Looking at some level of how do we make sure we're getting sort of healthy food options in the neighborhood. Is it a grocery store? Is it a retail store? More to come there, but sprinkling more housing north of Burlingame, some open space lots, and then multifamily houses above on Tuxedo and Elmhurst. More mixed-use housing type on Barr. Everyone had something very different to say about what should happen with the existing library space on Grand River and then the existing convent space at the back of Monica and Burlingame. And so understanding the concerns and the highlights and priorities here, we know that safety is of top concern in the neighborhood. We want to make sure that all of these amenities come with the aspect of improving and increasing safety in the neighborhood, stabilizing the streets. You can see maybe here with the, on Burlingame specifically, which we could hear from the neighborhood. And then a healthy mixture of housing is what we already kind of heard from the neighborhood with open spaces as anchored amenities. And so again, looking at the future housing rehabs more specifically, we can see that we have a lot of opportunity on Prairie to infill with different types of housing here. And then development that can sort of sprinkle itself above Burlingame as well. We understand that the back of the church and the church parking lot does take up quite a bit of just hard asphalt that can be a central space for the community to use. So we're going to look at ways that we can program and activate that parking lot space. And just looking, there's also just other parcels sprinkled about just because they are opportunities for future developments that hopefully you will have more input on. And then looking specifically at housing and mixed use on the corner of Barr and Livernois. So the first thing we did was look at the existing housing stock, and this does not represent all of the housing stock in the neighborhood, but as a quick understanding, what we're trying to do, if we do introduce any new types of housing, we want to make sure that we're responding to the existing context. And so the first thing that we wanted to see is there are setbacks. You can see the front yards everywhere in the neighborhood that's held throughout the neighborhood. There are likely porches and covered entries that are important to each housing typology, single or multifamily. It's likely that we will see pitched roofs and the height variation out throughout the neighborhood. You can see just the diversity in the materials and colors, the types of windows, the window scale, and the parking garages at the rear. The goal here also to increase landscaping and trees along that streetscape. And so understanding what is here, we took an initial study at what these new houses can start to look like. And so if we look at the first corner here, we're looking at single family typologies that are a little bit smaller, prairie style, not as many steps inside, understanding that there could be a need for senior housing stock in the neighborhood. Looking at 1 and 2 family typologies here. And these are really just high-level style guide suggestions. This is not, if you build it, it has to look like this. It's just, these are suggestions for how we want new developers coming into the neighborhood to understand how to respond to the context very specifically. And then attached to family typologies starting to look like a townhouse of sort, but a cluster for more density where we are able to on each street where we have these bigger areas of land. And then of course when we get much, much larger parcels grouped together, can we start to introduce these single and multifamily townhouse connected homes together and start to densify and bring even more variety into the neighborhood that still responds well to. And so just looking at these again, the existing housing types here, same thing. We're respecting the setbacks and maintaining the setbacks. The pitched roofs, the multi-dimensional facades, the diversity of the materials, and then of course introducing a lot more vegetation and trees and landscaping across the streetscape as well. And of course introducing, when we do group these more dense developments together, introducing a separate different type of parking at the rear of the house as well. So just looking at a little bit more, this is a corner of Burlingame that we'll see a little bit closer, and then you can just start to see smaller elements here showing up just a little bit more information about what these houses can start to look like. And so if you could very briefly imagine, it's right there, that is prairie. It looks almost exactly like this today. This is the existing street in need of some improvement. And then when we start to look at actually implementing and placing those houses in the typologies that we just mentioned and showed you in the diagramming, can we start to beautify the street, anchor it with a lot more housing density, more eyes on the street, more safety, more community building here? But you'll see those same principles here where the diversity of materials, the added trees and landscaping here, you can see how this block becomes a little bit more whole and a little bit more walkable and friendly for the pedestrian experience here. So we're gonna pause for another few minutes. If you could turn to your pages 6 and 7, we would really love, now that we've talked about some potential housing strategies and designs, we want to take a moment to reflect on those and just take a moment to digest them because we know it's a lot of information. And so really the feedback is just, do you like the proposed style? Is it fitting in with the neighborhood that you know well enough? And are there any specific people who we should consider first in terms of the people who need more housing in the neighborhood? So I'll pause there for a second. Okay. That wraps us up at 3 minutes. give you a few seconds to finish your sentence. So looking again at this, at the new renders for the neighborhood at Burlingame and Prairie. So if we look here, which I don't want to get too close to that speaker, so this is Prairie here and Burlingame here. And what we start to see is just anchoring these corners with the housing stability, making sure the streets are infilled with new different types of housing, start to fill in at least the corners of the neighborhood. And then, as we mentioned, there are some aspects of open space programming and the land behind the church that need to begin to be programmed to be used for the community as well. And so looking at the future mixed-use development, there are a few really great spaces for commercially zoned spaces that will be ground floor retail that should be catered to you and your needs, and then residential above potentially and or office space above. And so looking at the corner of Barr and Livernois, we wanted to start to propose these more densified spaces. So as I mentioned, we can look at the retail at the base level here and then start to introduce maybe there is a smaller food market as a resource for the neighborhood to find those healthy food options. Are there other parts of the retail space that can come off of Livernois into the neighborhood to start to increase that walkability? And as Dave mentioned, spaces that you don't have to drive to. We're not talking about going all the way to the suburbs or to downtown to get these amenities. And so we have not identified exactly what these spaces are because that's what this community is coming together to start to decide. But to give you an idea of what these corners and what these spaces can start to look like when we densify the blocks a little bit more as we get closer to the bigger avenues like Grand River and Livernois. And so thinking briefly about the open space, there's a concept of proposing a neighborhood passport idea where we can put open spaces on each vertical street here, so American Prairie, Monica, Stopel, where there is owned land that we can start to program as environmentally conscious, as these specific amenities to the neighborhood that can be these community resources. And so they can be short-term, they can be long-term, some of them might just be mowing the grass, some of them might be full developments on them. But how do we make sure that if we're not infilling a space immediately with housing, how do we make sure that space is still useful to you? And so we came up with a few different ideas for how we can start to do more permanent interventions and temporary interventions, really just based on how much infrastructure is needed to achieve some of these goals. And so, of course, we can look at single-family housing or housing on some of the open spaces and lots in the neighborhood. In some of our community meetings, we've heard that there's an interest in solar energy or geothermal energy. How do we make sure that some of these spaces start to speak to the needs of the community members that have come to these meetings and mentioned that that's something of interest? They could be pavilion kind of playscape, new amenities for the neighborhood here. In some cases, it might just be planting some trees and making sure people can sit in those neighborhoods with enough lighting and still eyes on the street to make sure that this is a safe and welcoming lot here. Is it an athletic court? Is there tennis or some other fun activity that is needed in the neighborhood that may not be happening immediately in Merritt Park or elsewhere that the community's had interest in? Like I said, some of these might be maintaining grass. There may be areas where we need to increase some levels of parking as we densify the streets. Is there an opportunity for some of these to become very fun artistic performance spaces or art parks? Are there any agricultural needs where we may want to introduce an urban garden or greenhouses to start to grow those healthy foods and vegetables that may become new resources for the healthy food in the neighborhood? And so we started with understanding that open lot activation. What can we do to start to infill the back of the church first, because that's owned by Straightgate, this corner lot also owned by Straightgate. Can we start to introduce these interchangeable activities, which we started with something that looks like and is a life-size chess back here, where we can actually just create more activity on this corner, landscape it really beautifully. This is really just sort of paved grass that can become any sort of activity, but starting with a life-size chess to understand where the neighborhood's interests are in terms of recreational activities. And so leading that into the back of the church here, can we just repave, recolor that back area and make it into a neighborhood really fun activity of roller skating back there? Can we have other group activities that come to the back of the church and can change as the neighborhood sees and gives their input as well? But really, the most important thing is how do we make these spaces more vibrant and inviting, and how do we make sure the neighborhood feels like the joyous, good resource for everyone here. And so just looking at that again from a bird's eye view, so you can start to see the resource hub starting to come together, the parking lot minimized a little bit more green trees there, so it's not a huge area of asphalt. Activity back here, so we get people working, using the resources in the resource hub, and then maybe having a lunch or a walk along the back of the church where we can activate this current alleyway as a walking track for the neighborhood too, which is meant to be more of a network around both all the way from Merritt Park, which is all the way up there, all the way through the neighborhood, and to continue north of here as well. And so just pinpointing here, these houses are not exact, but the first aspect of this is to start to rehab one of the homes on Monica that is also owned by Straight Gate as well. So very exciting things coming together. And again, just looking at everything all together, you can see Merritt Park, the activated resource hub, all of these amenities toward the back of the church. But then as you walk along here, this is not a vacant street filled with like potentially dilapidated homes. We're anchoring every aspect, every street with a really kind of lively whole community and trying to think of all of the different ways to supply more resources in the neighborhood. And then here you can just start to see, like I mentioned, Merritt Park's here. We want you to get across Grand River along the church here, and this walking track kind of around the back of the church starts to inch into a little bit of that parking so that we can create this fitness activity and sort of leisurely walkability in the neighborhood as well. So just looking at that very quickly, as I mentioned, Merritt Park here, and we're in the back of the church here, thinking very briefly just about the connections that need to be made in order for these spaces to start to work very well together. So you'll see here what I just mentioned, just walking up and around the parking lot. And then as I mentioned, again, we'd love to be able to connect to Elmhurst because we know the Greenway, the Joe Louis Greenway is coming along this edge here. So we know that it's likely that people will try to get in and out of the neighborhood on Elmhurst to get to that Greenway. And then just looking at Grand River and Livernois, we know that we need to do some streetscaping there to make that a more safe experience for bikers, pedestrians, and people experiencing the neighborhood, and technically automobiles too, to slow them down and make this a little bit more walkable as a space. And so looking again at what this all means together, so as Kuhu mentioned, the park here has these little pockets that you can see kind of briefly here that are meant to be experienced from the sidewalk. And we want to start to do that same thing around the church here, so you can start to see us landscaping and just providing a better experience as you walk across and walk down Livernois. We want to activate some of these open, vacant land spaces, reinforce some of the existing retail experiences there. And then what we really need to look at here more closely is that the streetscaping on Grand River has to change quite a bit. And we know that that's coming because it's already happening northwest of here. But if we look very quickly, and I'm gonna stop talking in a minute, the Grand River current space is almost 100 feet, or approximately 100 feet of vehicular traffic, right? It just kind of goes all the way across. It's not easy to cross Grand River at all. If you imagine Merritt Park is on the other side of Grand River, we have to do something to get people safely across. And not just safely, but in a really good way, a good experience there. And so what we're hoping is that what's already happening northwest on Grand River, where you're starting to see these medians in the middle of the road, the bike lanes on either side, and these crosswalks that actually allow you to cross safely. There's so many different aspects of what need to happen on that street that we really just want to create the awareness and the understanding of what to advocate for so that your area of Grand River is the next, or comes sooner rather than later. And so again, looking at all of these things together, we want to make sure to think about this as a full neighborhood. We're not only thinking of Renaissance of Hope or Straight Gate as one stakeholder. We know that there are very many people in the neighborhood who have really good interests and really good strategies to do really awesome things in the neighborhood. But looking at it all together, we want to make sure that you understand what we are proposing. And again, we're going to pause for a second so we can do some feedback. But just those different elements of street connectivity, housing, open lot programming, all of those different things, and giving you points in the timeline to give your feedback and get activated and involved in what happens in the future of the neighborhood is the goal here. And so this is our kind of overall neighborhood view for now. And so we'll pause to say, when does all of this happen? Because it's not all happening at once, of course. And as I mentioned, there are opportunities to do permanent and temporary space activations. And so as we've already talked about, John and Dave talked about Renaissance of Hope capacity building, getting employees, getting people who can actually do some of the legwork that is required for some of this development. Of course, we talked about the resource hub and Merritt Park. So in the next few years, we should see those amenities coming online. What else can we do in the meantime? We can definitely talk about the passport pilots, the Grand River pedestrian crossing back and forth between Merritt Park and the other side of Grand River to the church. And all of the other different future development sites, now's the time to be showing interest, to be strategizing, to actually be more definitively deciding what happens in those spaces. As I mentioned, the home rehab on Monica can happen in the near future, in the next 2 to 3 years. The neighborhood streetscaping does take quite a bit of neighborhood advocacy and involvement to steer and make sure that that happens faster, but it can happen, let's say, in the next 2 to 3 to 6 years. And as we start to see all of the renders that we showed with residential infill or rehab, maybe those are a little bit farther down the line, but there's many things of the lot programming that you can do in the interim. And the mixed use spaces, again, can happen earlier, but take the advocacy and the resources to be able to do it. And so the Burlingame mixed use on the Straight Gate lot can happen in building form, an actual mixed use form a little bit later down the line. And then of course, all of the mixed use and actual streetscaping here, though possible to happen earlier, take quite a bit of lead up, and all of these things likely need to happen in sequence in order for some of these things to come online and have the demand to meet the supply. And so that's a really brief glimpse at when to expect some of the things that we've presented today. And it's another feedback time. Very exciting. So on pages 8 and 11, we talked very briefly about the neighborhood passport idea. And what we've shown is, of course, like I said, the activated area, the back of the parking lot, the life-size chess. But there are a whole world of other ideas that can happen in some of these open lots that have yet to be programmed. And so if you could look at the scale and just understand, give your feedback on your understanding of the passport lot pilot program. And then of course, we'll spend a little bit more time just giving kind of high level overall thoughts of the strategic development plan. And so we will do one more page of questions and things, but before we do that, I'm just gonna give you time to write and get through your thoughts, and then I'm gonna pass this back to Dave to wrap us up.
As everyone is finishing up, we just again want to thank each of you for taking the time to be here this evening. Of course, this is not the end of this process. This is just a chance for us to share this plan with you, get feedback, refine, and of course, as we move forward, we'll be connecting on everything as everything moves forward. But we really, really appreciate you participating throughout this process, and hope that you'll be around to continue to help us make this plan the best that it can be. Before we go, I also want to acknowledge the rest of the design team. If they would come up, and we just want to thank them for their service. Carl, Ujiji, and Andrew. Yeah. Just want to publicly acknowledge how much we appreciate all the work that's been done. It's been a pleasure, and we know that this is just the beginning.